What's going on, heels? StatKing back again with another review of AEW Dark and NWA Powerrr. So this week's Dark is a little shorter than normal. They filmed a bunch of matches and they split them in half to use part this week, part for next week, because as we know right now, the AEW roster is currently on the Rock and Roll Rager, the Chris Jericho cruise. So it's a shorter episode of AEW Dark, but luckily it's the go-home episode of NWA Powerrr before the Hard Times pay-per-view. So it's a NWA Powerrr Super Show, so it's a little bit longer of a show. So roughly the same amount of time between the two. So AEW Dark has two matches this week. It's Diamante versus Big Swole. This is a great match. I really like this one. They got right into it. It's a little bit of chain wrestling to begin. Not chain wrestling, but a little good of pinning combinations attempts that kind of sold for the crowd that these two know each other well, which is something that was highlighted by Taz and Excalibur on commentary. And I really liked the fact that they were telling that story that these are two people who know each other, but this is the first time we're seeing them in an AEW ring. And sometimes I feel as though back in the day, WWE didn't really highlight that. Now they do. They have talked about, Shinsuke Nakamura has faced AJ Styles before in Japan, but this is the first time in WWE, the first singles match. Or things between Finn Balor and Shinsuke Nakamura, and so on and so forth. So they have kind of done that a bit better recently, but it's something that I think they can always improve upon to give that kind of depth of wrestling knowledge to the crowd to be like, these are, when they come to WWE, there's more. I guess it works. It wouldn't work in WWE's favor because they kind of want to be the ones in control or in charge of what wrestling is, even though they don't really consider themselves a wrestling company. But I think it would actually benefit them to suggest to the crowds or show to the crowds, hey, these guys have more experience than you may think, because otherwise only what you're seeing in front of you is what you see is what you get. And these guys really can be superstars in the ring. And so to build upon that and enhance that, I think is always a good thing. Big Swole picks up the win. Diamante was making her AEW debut, so it makes sense that Swole picks up the win, giving her more momentum as she moves forward in this new year. As the records have reverted, everybody's at 0. This, I think, was Big Swole's first win for the year, so that was really great to get her started early on in the year so she can be positioned better down the road. The second match, also the main event, was a 6-man tag match. Jungle Express versus Strong Hearts, and this match was phenomenal. This match had everything. It had heavy hitting action, it had high flying spots, it had a little bit of comedy, because you're always going to have that little bit of comedy aspect to it when you have Marco Stunt in the ring, because we can see the eye test, that he is smaller than the people he is facing. So there's going to be a little bit of that comedy aspect to it, but it had just everything. Just really phenomenal match. Jungle Express picks up the win, which I think is really good for them. Strong Hearts doesn't come over onto AEW that much, which I would like to see change. I would hope that they can get them back more throughout the course of 2019. Not 2019. Gosh, my first started throughout the course of 2020, throughout the course of this year. But having them is something really great, because you can put them in the ring with almost anybody and they are pulling off a really phenomenal match. I mean, Shima versus Daniels, Shima versus Omega, Linda Hawk, T-Hawk, and Linda Man have had great matches with other talents as well in AEW. It's just, they are solid hands in the ring, which is one of the reasons why they are trainers and in charge of people at OWE. And I think that's something that takes up a lot of their time. They are trying to build that company up in China. And so I can understand why having them in AEW is a sometimes treat, is a luxury, as opposed to a more commonplace occurrence. But I hope that throughout the course of 2020, that they can build upon that relationship and have these guys over more often. Okay, let's get Dark out of the way. Moving onwards to NWA Powerrr, the Super Show. So this is a go-home episode. This is the last. If you don't know what a go-home show means, is a pitch for wrestling terminology. What it means is it's the final pitch from the company as to why you should watch the pay-per-view, why you should pay for pay-per-view. So they want to kind of get all the top stars, top feuds in. Everybody needs to get a little bit of time, and that's why this show, instead of being an hour long, is about an hour and a half long. You need that extra bit of time. So we know that we have some big matches. We know for this card, we know that Allison Kay is going to be doing something. I think it's going to be something to do with Melina. Maybe it's going to be one of the other ones. I guessed it was going to be either Marty Bell or Thunder Rosa, but we know Allison Kay is going to be in action. We also know, more importantly, that this tapings has been building towards Aldis versus Morton, and we know that we're getting that match tonight. So the the show itself starts with a short promo from the other member of the Rock and Roll Express, and he is in full force as the other member of the Rock and Roll Express, because this is a singles action for Gibson and for Morton. And so after that, they move onwards to Thunder Rosa coming out with Tasha Steelz for a rematch of their pay-per-view match at Into the Fire. What I thought was kind of interesting about this match is that the crowd was definitely split. It's weird because Thunder Rosa is supposed to be the heel, and that's something that you've kind of noted if you've been really following along. It's something that you noted a lot during Thunder Rosa matches. It's hard for crowds to root against her, and she knows that, and she works throughout the match to try to get that heel heat, or try to at least get more sympathy towards the face that she's up against. But she's supposed to be the heel, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult for her to get that heat because the crowds really like her so much. And the other thing you have to remember is that this isn't... When you do a TV taping, you are in front of the same crowd over and over and over again. And if they like you, they're going to like you. You have to do some pretty heinous stuff as a heel, heinous heel action to kind of get that crowd to turn against you, unless you're just a natural at being a heel. And I personally haven't seen enough of Thunder Rosa to be able to say that she is a natural heel. She seems to be kind of more of suited for like a tweener role to me, but here she is cast as a full-fledged heel, and I think that she'll need to maybe improve on that heel work in the future. She does do I think she did a decent job at the Into the Fire pay-per-view of getting that heel heat back throughout the match. But here, just as at the pay-per-view, she defeats Tasha Steelz. The crowd is split. Afterwards, she has a promo saying that Melina is the only one who knows what the plan is for Allison. They'd have to ask Melina herself. Then they have a bit of a comedy promo from Royce Isaacs and Mae Valentine. The gist of the promo is talking about how Royce has not been doing too well. He's been taking losses, and they are wondering, or at least Marquez is wondering, whether it has anything to do with Mae Valentine, to which Royce Isaacs replies, are you trying to suggest that it has something to do with the fact that Mae and I have not been intimate yet? So they're doing a bit of a comedy thing, suggesting that either Royce is an idiot or he's easily manipulated by Mae Valentine, or both. Could very well be both. I don't know. It feels a little weird. It feels a little weird about it, especially because of what's going to happen right afterwards. So I guess we'll go to right afterwards, and then I'll come back. So right afterwards, they have a match between Trevor Murdoch and Thomas Latimer, the other member of the Wild Cards, to determine the final spot in the TV title tournament. Now, in this match, they're going to move fast, they're going to move furious. I think the match is under 3 minutes long, but Murdoch picks up the win without ever really laying a hand on Latimer. Latimer beats him up throughout the entirety of the match, and the way that Murdoch wins is he ducks a move, and when Latimer's staggering backwards, he rolls him up for a pin. Now, there's nothing wrong with ever underselling the devastatingness in wrestling of the roll-up pin whatsoever. It has won championships, it has defended championships, it has made people famous. But I think that somebody should have had maybe a little bit more offense before they win with a roll-up pin. I guess maybe they're putting over how heavy Trevor Murdoch is. But what's important to note about this is that Latimer loses. So we're talking in the very previous segment about how Royce Isaacs is losing. Now we see visually Latimer losing. These are two men who, as a tag team, were just the tag team champions. But more importantly than that, they turned heel, fully turned heel, and became part of the Strictly Business faction with Nick Aldis. If you're a heel faction, you should be winning. At least when you first start out, to put over the fact that you are a dangerous faction and that the faces need to figure something out if they're going to try to take you down. Last week, we had Scott Steiner join the Wild Cards and lose. The three of them lost. This week, we're reinforcing Royce Isaacs losing, and then we're seeing Latimer lose where his opponent didn't even touch him. So that part of it seems a little weird to me. I'm not sure where they're going with it. I've said before, I'll give Billy Corgan and NWA the benefit of the doubt, but this just seemed kind of like a misstep. Maybe, now there's a very good chance that they're going to kind of fix or salvage what's been happening with at the pay-per-view, as we'll get into in a little bit, but that remains to be seen. After this, they have a Allison K. Melina promo. Melina curses, she actually curses, as opposed to Scott Steiner just saying white trash and then bleeping that. Melina actually curses. They do bleep it out, but like it's a little bit better than white trash in the sense of if you're gonna bleep it out, make it bleep worthy. But here you have Melina playing head games with Allison K. Allison K wants the match with Melina. She wants to match with anybody really who is part of Melina's family, and she's willing to do anything to get it. So first, Melina dangles Thunder Rosa and says, title match with Thunder Rosa. And Allison K says, sure. And Melina says, no, that's the pay-per-view. Oh, okay. So then what's this week? You said you wanted me to be ready to wrestle this week. And Melina says, well, you'll get Thunder Rosa at the pay-per-view if you could beat Marty Bell today in a no DQ match. Now this seems a little weird because normally you want people to be facing each other to figure out if they're going to be able to face the champion, not the champion facing people to earn the right to defend her title against somebody at the pay-per-view. So the fact that Melina's pulling this off is just an incredible testament to how well the character of Melina has gotten into the head of Allison K. So really great work there. Now, when they actually have the match, Allison K, as you would expect, defeats Marty Bell. She beats her when Marty Bell introduces a chair in the match. It's a no disqualification match, and Allison K ends up hitting her finisher on Marty Bell and onto the chair. Pin 1, 2, 3. Solid match. They do a little bit of work in the crowd. They're doing the 10 count for the 10 hits. Crowd, because they can't really see Allison K, she's in one section of the bleachers. They don't realize that she stopped at 9 to do the build up for a 10 using her pinky fingers up hand gesture. And so there's a little bit of comedy there, I guess, in that sense, because they don't have Titantrons, which is a WWE term, but they don't have a Tron, big Jumbotron to show people what's going on in the match. Normally you wouldn't need to because the match is happening in the ring and everybody in the bleachers can see directly what's happening in the ring. But as soon as you go up into one side, difficult for the other side to see it. But, everything else about that match is really good. Keeping that story moving along. I will say that is something that NWA does well, moving stories along, which is one of the reasons why that Royce Isaacs and Latimer, the wild card situation, it's not sitting too well with me, or it's kind of bugging me a little bit. Speaking of stories moving along, the next segment is Pope and Eddie Kingston. It's a promo segment. Pope's talking about how he didn't lose. It was Eddie and Homicide, and he's still looking to figure out who he's putting together for his team of superstars, his horsemen, but when they do, they're going to change the NWA. take it away, Eddie. Eddie cuts a really strong promo about how he's not going to make any excuses for what happened. He knows that he lost. They shouldn't have had the match because of Homicide's shoulder, but Pope, kind of rushed them back into it. Pope convinced them it would be a good thing. It turned out it wasn't, but he's not going to... He's a grown man. He's not going to cry over spilled milk. He's not going to cry over a loss. He's going to get back up and keep moving. After this, there's a comedy segment in the ring. There's a Mongrovian karate demonstration with Question Mark and Aaron Stevens at the announce table on the mic. I don't know if I can do it justice. If there is nothing that you watch from this episode, if there's anything you watch from this episode, just watch the main event, phenomenal match, and this segment, because it is hilarious. It is just absolutely hilarious. They're question marks in the ring with two people who have question mark masks on. There's the classic, what if you're... it's a demonstration of Mongrovian karate as a self-defense course, which you can buy, I think it was for $99 a week, I think it was. So a little bit on the pricier side. But when you think about how effective Mongrovian karate is, it's a steal. So here they're doing demonstrations like the classic, what if you're being mugged? What if you're being mugged and the person has a gun? What if you're being mugged and the person has a knife? What if you're being mugged and the person has mace? Like all of those sorts of things. And as it turns out, the end result is that, or the ending of the segment is that Question Mark is going to break a solid piece of wood. If I remember right, I think it's Mongrovian oak. But it's a tree from Monrovia, a very rare tree from Monrovia that has very strong wood. And Aaron Stevens says that he feels as though it is time for him to try to break the wood instead of Question Mark, so that he can progress and get his fourth stripe on his black belt and become a fourth degree NWA national champion. So he gets into the ring, and it's weird. All of a sudden, the guy who's holding the board hits him with it. And it turns out it's none other than Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks has not forgotten all of the issues that are going on between him and Aaron Stevens, even though he's been distracted by this TV title tournament. He has not forgotten. He remembers, and he is coming for Aaron Stevens. It's going to be a little weird when you think about... Well, I mean, not so much because Ricky Starks is still in the TV title tournament, but when we find out what is going to be a pay-per-view match on NWA Hard Times in 2020, I can't even try to make the mistake again of saying 2019. This is definitely 2020, and they're doing this to us. But we'll get there when we get there. So after this, we find out that Zane Dawson, who beat his brother last week, the brothers Dawson, when they went to war, he has that cast, right? And his brother was going after the cast to try to beat him, and because of that, his hand and wrist have been re-injured, and he's having to pull out of the TV title tournament. So they're going to have a Battle Royale Rumble-style match in order to determine who will be replacing him. So this is actually really... I like the concept of it. It borrows elements from the Royal Rumble in that everybody, their entrance at certain time periods, like the 90 seconds of the Royal Rumble. Much like a Battle Royale, which the Royal Rumble is, you can be eliminated by over the top rope. But however, you can also be eliminated by being pinned or submitted in the ring, which is different from a Royal Rumble match, and I kind of liked that aspect of it because it creates more opportunities, it creates more ways to eliminate people, which definitely gives people different avenues of being able to get over with the crowd, like how Kofi Kingston took that one option of going over the top rope and refusing to go over the top rope, as Kofi Kingston does every year. Now there are different ways to try to do that in this match with 3 different ways of getting somebody eliminated. So this match comes down to Ken Anderson and Colt Cabana as the final 2. These are tag team partners. If you've been paying attention and you think you know where this is going, you are absolutely correct. Colt Cabana and Ken Anderson shake hands to say that they're going to fight honorably. Ken rolls up Colt, pins him, 1, 2, 3. He wins the match and gets the spot to go into the TV title tournament. Now, he also, after the match, extends his hand again to Colt and say, no hard feelings. Like, we're a team, yes, but we gotta try to do what we can do to progress ourselves. Singles competition as well. Colt understands. Colt's been the forgiving person throughout this storyline, despite Ken taking kind of advantage of that friendship, and shakes hands with him. And after that, Ken Anderson lays him out. Mic check. I think he hits a mic check where he forces Cabana with the mic check into the metal ring post, just knocks him out, turns straight up heel. And we feel for Colt because Colt stuck out his neck multiple times for Ken Anderson. Chicago, feel bad for Colt. I mean, I'm not from Chicago originally, but you still boom boom Cabana, Maxwell Street Polish, So they're building something there. We're definitely going to be able to get some Ken Anderson Colt Cabana matches going forward, coming out of the pay-per-view, especially if you have Colt Cabana cost Ken Anderson one of his matches, assuming he progresses further than the first round of the tournament matches on the pay-per-view. If you have Colt cost Ken Anderson, then now we're going to have some kind of nice back and forth. After this, there is a hilarious promo segment from James Storm and Eli Drake trying to put over Morton in the main event. It's really, really funny, including James Storm just straight out leading everybody in a prayer service. Not as funny as the karate. Oh wow, I messed up before. Karate segment before, but it is very, very good. After this, they do a backstage segment with Joe Galli telling us who will be in the 2 open spots. So if you remember, we discussed about how in the TV title tournament there are going to be 2 open spots. We don't know who they're going to be. They could be people from other promotions. I guessed that now that NWA and Ring of Honor are still working closely together, if not more closely together than they were before, that one of the spots would go to a Ring of Honor wrestler. As it so happens, that is the case. The first spot will be going to Matt Cross, who is not a Ring of Honor wrestler, who's more of a freelancer, and maybe, as I kind of suggested or theorized last week, this would be a way to bring in somebody from the outside into the NWA that they've signed, but they're, this is a great way to have a debuting superstar or debuting wrestler. Superstar isn't a NWA term. The other person that's going to be in the tournament, who is from Ring of Honor, is Dan Maff. So that's a big addition, no pun intended, no pun intended for this tournament. So Matt Cross will be facing Ricky Starks. Dan Maff will be facing Zicky Dice, which will be really interesting to have the heel Zicky Dice trying to deal with somebody of Dan Maff's size and strength. And there is an announcement that if Ricky wins the world title tonight, he will defend at the pay-per-view. If Aldis wins, then Rock and Roll Express will defend against 2 teams, Wild Cards, and James Storm and Eli Drake. So this seems kind of weird, in a sense. You would think that Storm and Drake would know, and maybe this is all just due to the taping, how things are being taped, but you'd think that Storm and Drake would know that if Aldis wins, they're going to be in line for a shot at the tag titles in a triple threat match. So in a way, maybe you don't want Ricky to beat Aldis. At the same time, you are also wondering, what the hell did Wild Cards do to get a title shot? What did they do to deserve being in that match? They lost when they were a tag team with Scott Steiner. They have not been winning singles matches. Latimer just lost. We just saw Latimer lose to Murdoch without Murdoch even touching him. So you got to wonder how these guys are getting in this match, and this is what I was referring to earlier when I was saying there seems to be something off. So maybe there's something that we don't know. Maybe then which is kind of giving away the main event. Wild cards will win the tag titles, and that's kind of how NWA Creative is salvaging, in a sense, kind of throwing out singles losses for Isaacs and Latimer. They're going to put the tag titles back on them. Anyway, we also get an announcement that in 2020, in the year of our Lord 2020, in an election year, 2020, in an Olympics year, 2020, we will be getting Scott Steiner on a pay-per-view in a title match against Aaron Stevens for the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. This is just a weird match to me. I don't understand this match. I really don't. Aaron Stevens is in the NWA more of a comedy wrestler. Scott Steiner is a wrestler, I suppose. It's just, I don't know what the purpose of the match is, because Question Mark is in the tournament. I don't know if he's going to be able to come out and help Stevens next. I don't know if they would want Stevens, a comedy wrestler, to beat Steiner. I don't even know if Steiner's agreeing to that. And if they're having Steiner beat Stevens, that means they're going to have Steiner more regularly on NWA programming. The guy can barely move, and you're bleeping him out when he says white trash. Like, what do you think is going to be happening? So I'm not sure where they're going with that, but if anything, it makes the pay-per-view interesting, right? So after this announcement, we have the main event match, and it's really great. It's crazy because, you have somebody like a Scott Steiner who we don't know what we don't know what is going on with him when it comes to his ability to move and his ability to wrestle and compete at a high level in this day and age. But on the flip side, we have Rock and Roll Express, and you would not believe that there's a 7-year age difference between Morton and Steiner, and it's in Steiner's favor. Sorry, not 7 years, 6 years. Steiner is 57, Morton is 63. Morton, despite the fact that he moves slow, moves better, harder, better, faster, stronger, to quote Daft Punk, than Steiner does, easily. He still has in-ring awareness. He still knows how to work a crowd. I don't see any of those things from Scott Steiner. But Morton has it, and has it in spades still, despite the fact that he can't move as well, and he shows it in this main event. This is a really great match, despite the limitations of Morton. Aldis is carrying Morton throughout the match. We know that. We know that going into it. And it kind of highlights how well Aldis works, because Aldis can have matches with James Storm, and he can also turn around and have matches with Ricky Morton, and he's making both of them believable. He's taking the hits from James Storm, and it's just, he's selling it the way he should. And on the flip side, he's taking hits from a much older competitor, and he's putting over Morton's knowledge of the game, his veteran experience, and the fact that Morton is just a heavy hitter. His ability to do that is a testament to his in-ring ability and the in-ring ability of his opponents. James Storm did very well in that match. Ricky Morton does phenomenal in this match as well. You have a story that's being told of, can the wily veteran pull out that one last win over Aldis? Now, we know that Morton's probably not going to win this match. Yes, stranger things have happened. Sure. Did anybody expect the Rock and Roll Express were going to win and beat the wild cards? Maybe, maybe not. But there was that chance, right? And in this match, there still is that chance. And that's a story that's being told. Even if you don't think that the chance is that big, the chance still exists. And Morton takes that all the way to the end, and Aldis lets you believe it all the way to the end when he just reverses a pin attempt, basically, and is able to pin Morton, ending Morton's dreams, crushing his dreams, and still defending, still world champion. So let's go on and talk about the actual pay-per-view that's coming up this Friday, and talk about predictions for the overall pay-per-view. So just to quickly run down... Oh, sorry, before we get there. It did seem kind of weird that a go-home show for the pay-per-view was announcing matches for the pay-per-view on the show. But if you are, I guess NWA is anticipating that if you are an NWA fan, you're going to watch the pay-per-view, which I mean it's fairly true. After all, only 150 people can show up to these tapings. These tapings have been sold out every time that they've done them. I think now they've had 2, maybe 3 tapings, and they've been sold out. The previous Into the Fire pay-per-view sold out. Hard Times sold out. Now, whether you want to argue that it's difficult or not to sell out 150 people in a studio, it's still 150 people in a studio that you're selling out. You know, like that is still an accomplishment in this day and age when people's attention spans are very slim. So the fact that they're doing it, the fact that they're able to pull it off, kudos to them. So I think they're anticipating, hey, people are going to watch regardless. We can kind of announce matches this late in the game the week of. But anyway, to the pay-per-view itself. So let's run down the matches. We have Nick Aldis versus Flip Gordon. Interpromotional NWA versus ROH match. Title is not on the line from everything I understood, or everything I've seen. I think that Aldis picks up the win, and then you have Marty show up again, with other parts of Villain Enterprise as well. Brody King, PCO. That's definitely, I wouldn't make it the main event. I think I spoke about that last week. I would not make it the main event of the pay-per-view. I'd put it somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between tournament matches maybe. You have Allison Kay defending the title versus Thunder Rosa. I also think that Allison Kay retains in order to get that match with Melina down the road. You have Aaron Stevens versus Scott Steiner. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that Scott Steiner wins, because I don't see Aaron Stevens. I don't see how they're going to have a comedy wrestler beat somebody like Scott Steiner, and Scott Steiner agreed to it. I don't see that happening. Rock and Roll Express versus Eli Drake, James Storm, and the Wild Cards. I think this one we kind of give to the Wild Cards. That's where I think they're going. You kind of build back up the Wild Cards by giving them the tag titles back again. You also are giving Eli Drake and James Storm something to do, because now they can chase the Wild Cards, saying they were never pinned for the loss. Because I would say have Wild Cards pin Rock and Roll Express, because it's the final Strictly Business over Rock and Roll Express, and that's kind of, you are ending that feud or that program. And I think you give Rock and Roll Express a little bit of time off, because you've kind of showed them a lot over the past tapings, and I think you now give time for Eddie Kingston, Homicide, if his shoulder is healed, to kind of come up. You also give more time to Ricky Starks and Zicky Dice, other people that you are trying to build, because Rock and Roll Express aren't the answer for the future of the company, right? Like, they're great for the present, they're great for the here and now, but you need people to be able to carry the company down the road, and that involves building stars. So now the TV title tournament itself. So the first match is Tim Storm versus Ken Anderson, and then Ricky Starks, Matt Cross, Zicky Dice versus Dan Maff, and Question Mark versus Trevor Murdoch. So I give Tim Storm. I would put Tim Storm over Ken Anderson, with Colt costing Ken Anderson. Rick Starks over Cross, Zicky Dice over Maff, and with Question Mark versus Murdoch, I'll give you Question Mark going over Trevor Murdoch, unless there's something weird that happens. It's kind of funny because they're both, while Question Mark is technically a heel, he is heavily cheered, and he is up against a equally cheered and equally beloved face in Trevor Murdoch. So it's kind of a weird face-on-face match, even though it's a heel versus face match, technically speaking, if you look at it on paper. But I'll have Question Mark going over. So then in the semifinals, you have Tim Storm versus Ricky Starks, Dice versus Question Mark, and here I have Ricky Starks beating Tim Storm. You have the veteran putting over the young guy. You have Ricky Starks proving that he can beat Tim Storm, beat a veteran, and that's also somebody that Aldis beat. So that's something to keep in mind because Ricky Starks went the distance against Aldis. And in the second set of matches, I'm having Zicky Dice go over question mark, leading to our finals, which is Zicky Dice versus Ricky Starks. And I think this is one that's a toss-up. I think either way, you do something really great for the company, because either you're building up your next kind of really strong heel in the form of Zicky Dice, somebody who the crowd already is not inclined to like, the outlandish Zicky Dice, or you're putting the belt on one of your really hot and up-and-coming stars in Ricky Starks. And I think that either way, NWA wins. Personally, I think I put the belt on Zicky Dice, but I think it's makes more sense to put it on Ricky Starks, simply because your tag, if going by what I've said previously, your world title, men's world title, will be on a heel. Your women's world title will be on a face. Your mid-card title will be on a heel. Your tag team title would be on a heel because wild cards would win. So you're having way too many heels holding belts now. Let's put the TV title on to a face, and you have the heels try to take it from the face. That, I think, is probably the better of the ways to look at it. And either way, if Aaron Stevens retains, it's still on a heel. If Steiner wins, it's on a heel. So that, I think, is kind of the crowning moment. And if you make this match the main event, you're definitely telling everybody watching and everybody in the crowd, Zicky Dice, Ricky Starks, they're here to stay. These guys are going to be some of the people who are the future of the NWA. And that's kind of something that the NWA has been building towards. Who is going to be the future? Because they already had, the reason why we're getting Aldis versus Gordon and Aldis versus Morton is because there really wasn't anybody left for Aldis to face. That was, he was correct. Despite it being a heel statement, he was correct in stating that he has gone through almost everybody on the roster. There was really nobody who made sense for him to beat. He'd beaten both Storms, Tim and James. He hadn't beaten Mama Storm, but he had beaten both of them. So it made sense that you need to build up that future. You need to build up who could be your world champion down the line. And I think Ricky Starks is definitely a world champion down the line. So is Zicky Dice, and this will be a great way to showcase them. So I hope you guys join me in watching the pay-per-view. I'm not sure who's going to be doing the pay-per-view recap, but either way, I'll definitely be talking about the pay-per-view in some way, shape, or form, because I'll be dealing with the fallout on a week-to-week basis with NWA Powerrr going forward. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.